been waiting way too long. Yeah, I've been out here trying to get it. Yeah, I've been waiting way too long.
All right, this is the video for slope-intercept form. We're in Unit 3. We're in the second part of Unit 3. So what is slope-intercept form? Slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So slope-intercept form, this is the way to write an equation for a linear function. It's one way to write an equation for a linear function. Remember, a linear function is a straight line on a graph, and it's a function that has a constant rate of change. So one way we can write an equation of these lines is with slope-intercept form. M is the slope, so M is the slope in the equation, and B is the y-intercept. Remember, the y-intercept is the y value when x equals 0. And then the y and the x will be used in order to find points on the line. Also, if you know a point on the line, you could plug it in for x and y and possibly solve for m or b depending on what information you are given. So given the slope is 5 and the y-intercept is -6, write the equation in slope-intercept form. So y equals mx plus b. My m is 5. So y equals 5x. My b, my y-intercept is -6. So I'm going to put -6, which that is the same as y equals 5x plus -6. But this right here really confuses me, and so I'm thinking it probably would confuse you. When I add a negative, it is the same as subtracting a positive. So this is how I would want to see your answer written. You need to understand that from this equation that we know that the y-intercept is -6 and not just 6. And remember, we would write that as an ordered pair like that. Given the slope is -2/3 and the point -3,4 is on the line, write the equation of the line in slope-intercept form. So we want our equation to look like this. So that means we need m and we need b. Well, we have m right now, but we don't have the y-intercept. The reason I know we don't have the y-intercept is because this point does not have a 0 where the x is. So that is just a point on the line. So if I wanted to, I could graph this line and try to figure out the y-intercept, but instead I'm going to actually use my equation. So what do I know about this equation? Well, I do know an x value and a y value, and I do know m. So I'm going to plug in accordingly. 4 equals -2/3 times x, which is -3 plus b. So again, I only have one unknown, and with one unknown, I can solve for that unknown. So I'm going to simplify first. So -2/3 times -3 is going to be a positive. I know that. This is the same as -3 over 1. So -2 times -3 is 6. 3 times 1 is 3. So 6 over 3, which is 2. 6 over 3, which is 2. So 4 equals 2 plus b. So now I'm going to solve for b by subtracting 2 on both sides. So 2 equals b. So that is my y-intercept. So now I can write my equation. Y equals -2/3 x plus 2. I have my slope, my m, and I have my y-intercept, which is my b. Remember, this would be written as 0, 2. So if this is one of the points that they give you, then you don't have to actually plug it in because this point is the y-intercept. So keep that in mind. Always look to see if they give you the y-intercept. Rewrite the equation in slope-intercept form. So if you remember, this is standard form. And we used standard form to graph a line using the intercepts by plugging in a 0 for x or a 0 for y to find the x and y intercept. But this time we're going to actually solve for y because we want to get it into slope-intercept form. So if you notice, slope-intercept form, always the y is by itself. So we want to get y by itself, and we've actually already done this in some form or fashion. So I'm going to get y by itself. I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides. Remember, the 8 and the 3x are not like terms, so I'm just going to put them next to each other. 8 minus 3x. I'm going to divide by 2. Always make sure that if there's whatever sign is in front of your coefficient here, that you make sure you bring that sign down with you. So now y equals, now I need to divide both of these terms by 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4. Negative 3 over 2 is just negative 3 over 2x. Now if you notice, this equation looks a little bit different than we normally see it. Well, what happens here is that this is actually my b, 0, 4, and this is my m. How do I know that? Well, because the m is always next to the x. So I could also write this as y equals negative 3 over 2x plus 4. And again, that tells us that our slope is negative 3 over 2 and that our y-intercept is 0, 4. So now what we're going to do is we're going to graph this. So y equals negative 3 over 2x plus 4. So my y-intercept is 4, so I'm going to plot that point first, which is right here on the y-axis, 0, 4. My slope is negative 3 over 2. So if you want to, you can think about m being slope. Why is it an m? I don't really know the answer, but I want you to think about m being how we move. So my slope tells me how to move to get to the next point on my line. So I need to move down 3 over 2, 1, 2, 3 over 2. And after you plot that second point, it's always good to look at your sort of imaginary line and think about, is that line going to be a negative slope or a positive slope? And you want it, in this case, we want it to be negative, and if I were to draw a line there, it would be negative. So we're good. So okay, I went down 3 over 2, but I could also go up 3 and to the left 2. You see, that's going to be on the same line. So you need to understand what this movement means and how it works. And once you have enough points, you can use a straight edge and you can draw a line. So that is how you would graph that line. Now, remember we talked about in standard form, we know the intercepts. And so if we think about the original equation was 3x plus 2y equals 8. So if I plug in a 0, then that means for x, then that means 2y equals 8, which means y equals 4, which we have that, 0, 4. And if I plug in a 0 for y, then I'm going to get 3x equals 8, which means x equals 8 over 3, which would be 8 over 3, 0. Well, how much is 8 over 3? Well, it's more than 2. In fact, it's almost 3. And if you look at our graph, you can see that our line crosses between 2 and 3 on the x-axis. So that does seem to line up. But you can see here that with my x and y intercept, that may not be the best way to graph the line because this point is going to be tricky to graph by hand. So that is slope-intercept form. Make sure you know what the equation is and how to use it.
I've been waiting way too long.